would like to start this video off by saying that this is a Malazan book. Therefore, this is a good book, a really good book. Dare I say great? Written with a level of sophistication and maturity that most other authors and books can only dream of. And I mean that very legitimately. So at this point, I hope that I've heaped enough praise onto this book that I can feel comfortable saying that this is the worst one so far. Today we're talking about Reaper's Gale, Book 7 in the Malazan, Book of the Fallen. And this will be a full spoiler review. Like as always, once I get this far into a series, I just go full spoilers with the videos. And it also will be a little bit kind of all over the place because my notes are a little bit all over the place. So it might be a mess of a video, but we're going to do our best. Now, like I was saying, this is a legitimately good book, and it's just extremely unfortunate that for the very first time in this series, I have some real legitimate complaints about this book, which feels weird to say because when I got done reading this, I felt like they were legitimate, real complaints. But in hindsight, if this was any other book in any other series, I don't even know if they would be legitimate complaints. But when you set the bar as high as Steven Erikson has set the bar, and then you shoot and you fall short and you deliver something that feels legitimately less than its predecessors, it feels like a letdown. Let me explain. I have been raving ever since I started reading this series about how this series feels so unique among series. It doesn't feel like a series where this book's getting to that one and that one to that one. It legitimately felt like a series of standalone novels that just happened to take place in the same world with the same characters, but it's such a big cast of characters that you were only seeing a portion of them at a time, and some of them would pop in and pop out from other stories, and it was like a shuffling and a reshuffling, and it just was so vastly unique among series. And this is the very first time that a book did not feel like a standalone novel. It felt like we're kind of trying to bridge between this book and this book. We're just getting from point A to point B, point A being the last book, point B being the next book. And we're just trying to fill in the gaps and get all the pieces in place for the next installment, which is a problem and a pitfall that a lot of other series fall into quite frequently, but it's a pitfall that Steven himself has never fallen into until now. Now, I did say in the last video that it felt like we were finally starting to have that convergence. Everything's starting to come together, and we're going to start to form this into one cohesive story as we barrel towards the end and the big conclusion and all of that stuff. And that holds true, and that is what we're doing, and we are converging things together, and things are coming, together and whatnot. But I thought that in doing so, Steven would be able to avoid or sidestep that feeling of this is just a connector novel getting from point A to point B. And then on top of that, there's the even bigger sin of the fact that the first half of this book was pretty boring. Like the entire first half was a bit of a slog to get through. And that's kind of painful to say. Like I legitimately feel like half of this book could have been tightened up quite a bit. And that really sucks. That's like legitimately the first time that I have said that about this series. It is a complaint I have not had in a series of books this big. And that is a complaint that I have quite frequently, as a matter of fact, in a lot of other books, in a lot of other series. There's a lot of 1,000-page books that I'm like, there's a great 800-page version of this out there. I don't know if I needed 1,000 pages to tell me that story. But I haven't said that thus far about Malazan, and I feel like this one I could say that about. That, and legitimately, there's a lot of stuff happening in the first half of the book that I just don't kind of care about for the first time really in the series. Between Red Mask, which I don't really care about, the first new edition, might I add, in the series that I have really not cared with and not connected with the entire time. There's been a lot of new editions where I don't care initially, but by the time we get to the fruition of that storyline or that plot thread that he's set up for me, I do care very much by the end of it. And he set it up and I didn't care. And then he concluded it and I still really kind of didn't care. And then there's the whole our challengers traveling to meet Rulad, which we kind of did in the last book. And then we're going to spend the entirety of this book doing more of, which I thought was wild how long that took and how much time we spent on that. Like, that was just, let's go. In the time that Karsa traveled across the continent, doing essentially not much to get to Rulad, Quick Ben and his crew have an entire adventure in an entire another world. Like, it was not thrilling stuff. The Karsa traveling stuff. Ikariam, same thing. Which in turn makes it feel not super balanced when, you've got these people over here traveling across the continent, basically adding up to a whole lot of nothing. And somebody else over here like Quick Ben and Silchas Ruins group and Fear and all of them doing all kinds of crazy cool stuff. But I will say on the flip side of that, T-Hole and Bug, their plot line's kind of like a whole lot of nothing as well while they work to bring down the economy. But I still enjoyed every last bit of that one because I can't help but love T-Hole and Bug. And it sets up all this dramatic tension for what's going to happen when that house of cards falls, because there's too many other things on the board converging, coming together, all of the challengers. And so that was actually setting up a good bit of tension for me with a great payoff towards the end. So that was probably the one thread pulling me through the first half of the book, other than Quick Ben and Fear. Okay, there's a couple threads pulling me through the first half of the book, but there were also enough dragging it down that I don't know. It was the hardest section of any Malazan book that I've had to get through, and it was a big chunk of the book. Now, speaking of Quick Ben, I will say I love me some Quick Ben. I continue to just absolutely eat up his sections of the story. And then you're going to put him together with Trull and Onrak and even Hedge coming back and being a part of it. Oh my gosh, I just ate up those sections of the book. Some of the best. That and everything, like I said, with Fear and Silchas Ruin and Kettle, and just those two groups just traveling around doing whatever they're doing. Just great stuff. Some of the best. Not to mention the whole idea of Silchas Ruin and what he is and who he is, and the fact that he's this weird albino Tist Andi, and every time something happened and he would bust out his singing blades, yes please. And then I will say, as far as the primary main continent story goes, the second the Bone Hunters landed on the shore, I was all in. Now I'm in. Now I'm invested. Now I'm on board with everything that's happening in the book, which happens about the halfway point of the book. And then the whole second half of the book was just, balls to the wall. I was just invested, pretty much locked in for the rest of the book. It's just unfortunate that the first half didn't have that same driving force that the second half did. Now, speaking of the Bone Hunters, why exactly are they here? I'm not 100% sure. Why did Tavare even show up? What is she doing? Why is she there? What was her driving force or motivation for coming all the way across the ocean to this weird continent they don't even know nor have ever been to, and just deciding to take it on full force head first? Like, I don't understand even a little bit. Unless I missed something, I don't think I understand what her motivations for doing what she's doing are. I know why Karsa's coming. I know why Ikariam is coming. I know what the crippled god is doing here and what his investments are. I even understand why Quick Ben is on his way, and why it matters to Shadow Throne, which is why it matters to Quick Ben, because he's kind of working for Shadow Throne right at the minute anyway. And the convergence is happening, and it all makes perfect sense, except for Tavare. I'm not sure what she's doing or why she's here. Like I said, I might have missed that somehow. I don't know. I will say that I had a very strong feeling as all of this is coming together, and the economy is about ready to collapse, and the Malazans are moving in, and the fighters are coming up to take on Rulad, and all of this is kind of coming together. I had this strong feeling that the economy was going to come down, Rulad was going to get taken, the Malazan forces were going to come in and just crush everything and take over, and somehow Tavare would end up in some position of power over this particular continent. I don't know how I thought she was going to end up in the position of power, but I thought, man, that's going to be strange. She's going to be down here. Lassine's going to be up there. They might be on the same side. They might be antagonistic towards each other. I thought, man, that's going to be a real strange power struggle moving into the next couple of books. That didn't happen. Like, not even close. Not for 1 second did I foresee Emperor T-Hull coming up at the end of that threw me for a loop. I thought, what the fuck? But yeah, so that prediction fell through on my part. Either way, that's what I get for attempting to predict anything in a Malazan book. Anyway, moving on from anything and everything, even remotely negative, and pretty much anything substantial about the review, I just want to kind of gush about some of the things that I genuinely love in this book, because there's just so much to love in a Malazan book. And of course, I'm going to start with my boy, Quick Ben, and just what is up with him and his powers. For the first section of the book, he's visibly shaken and has a greatly reduced power, it seems like, because of what he has just gone through, his fight with Icarium. And then all of a sudden, when he shows up in Lethar and he has to go toe-to-toe with Silchas Ruin, he displays a level of power that his friends have never seen from him before. By friends, I mean Fiddler and Hedge. They are literally shocked at the level of force and force of will, force of magic that Quick Ben is able to produce, because they've never seen anything like this from him before, and these are people that have been with him for a while. So my question at this point is he more powerful than he has ever been before, coming out the other side of all of this that he's gone through, or has he just never shown what he's capable of to his closest travel companions before? Neither of which would surprise me in the least. Then, of course, there is the confrontation that happens at the Cavern of the Gates, or whatever that place is called, which just completely insane. And Steven never ceases to amaze me with his ability to shock me with some of the ways that he chooses to play out his events. Call it a subversion of expectations, but you have the two Sengar brothers and the tension that's happening here as these two groups basically come face to face suddenly and kind of out of nowhere. And you have Fear, who then has thought this entire time that Trull is dead, and the second they come face to face, Fear is killed instantly and very unceremoniously. It was genuinely shocking. Like, I had no clue that was coming, did not see it for 1 second. Just his ability to hit you with something that unsuspected, and then the impact with which he hits you is just never ceases to amaze me, ever. And then this whole thing ends with Kettle being killed, essentially, and used as a seed to create a new Azath house, which then will encompass all of the gates and hold Scabandari's soul, I think. This then leads to the survivors of that encounter going to Lethar, where Trull will be very unceremoniously killed while he's mourning for the death of his brother Rulad, who was also relatively unceremoniously killed by Karsa. Although that one I kind of really enjoyed, that whole showdown between Karsa and Rulad, because it just seemed so fitting and appropriate that Karsa would just stand there and Rulad would go and gas himself out, and Karsa would take him down with a single swing, basically cutting off his arm and then letting him bleed out on the floor. It just seemed like an amazingly fitting ending for Rulad. It was kind of a pathetic ending for a pathetic man. That's not to say that he's not maybe one of the most tragic characters in the entire series so far, because it's just such a heartbreaking tale. Rulad's from start to finish, to what he was, what he became, how he became what he became, what it meant to him, what it did to him. Like, everything about it was super tragic. But in the end, it was pretty much, I can't say it any other way, a pathetic end to a pretty pathetic character. And it just felt right. Now, going back to Trull, I will say I was legitimately upset by the death of Troll Sengar. After everything we've gone through, after all of the books, after all of the bonding with him and Onrak and everything he's gone through several books now, I was genuinely upset when he died. Of course, there's Rulat, the death you see coming a mile away. Then there's Fear. And you're like, oh, that was genuinely shocking, genuinely surprising. That was kind of cool. I didn't see that coming at all. And then there's Troll. And you're just kind of like, you know what, Steve? Fuck you. I don't appreciate that. He was my friend, and you just did that. Like, it was like the varying degrees of Sengar reaction from me as they died. And I didn't appreciate Troll one bit. But those then are just examples of how well told this story is and how well written this story is. And it's just unfortunate that I'm just so torn on this book because the highs were so high. And I don't want to say the lows were so low because they weren't really so low, but they were long and drawn out. And they lasted a lot longer than I wish they would have. And I am legitimately more excited to get to the end and the conclusion of this story than I was before I read the book. So clearly the book is doing something right. Clearly the book has taken my excitement and moved it in the direction that it's supposed to be moving it in. I just wish that I would have enjoyed it more consistently all the way through. Like, I would say that the second half of this book is an easy 9 out of 10 for me. And I'd say the first half of the book was much more akin to like a 7. So, which sucks because I haven't had any feeling of that low of a score. Not that a 7's a low score. 7's is still a good book. It's way above average, which is 5. But there hasn't been a single book that I haven't given a 9 or a 10 to in this entire series. It's been that stupendous. And I'm probably, once I average out the first half being a 7, second half being a 9, I'm going to average it out to an 8 overall for the book. And that's the lowest score this series has taken thus far. And that's just unfortunate that it was like that. It's even more unfortunate that it was consistently because of that first half, because that was a kind of a drag to get through. Anyway, I'm going to go with an 8, overall 8 for the story. I think it was genuinely a good book, genuinely a good story, and I'm going to go ahead and stop talking about it now. As always, everybody, the link for my Patreon's in the description below. The link for my Discord's in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.